Welcome to Better Than Ever Live, wherever you're watching, wherever you're listening. Hope you're making today your masterpiece. My name is Dr. David Geier, orthopedic surgeon, sports medicine specialist, and media medical expert. I help you feel and perform your best regardless of how old you are, how hurt you are, or what kind of medical problems you have. I want you playing with your kids actively or grandkids. I want you running, lifting weights, playing soccer, tennis, pickleball, whatever it is you love to do. I want you to do that pain-free. So that's a lot of what we talk about here. Thank you so much for joining us as we get close to Thanksgiving, the Thanksgiving holiday season here in the United States. Very excited for that. I've been working like crazy the last few days and last few weeks, and I am very excited for a long break. But I will say, Muhammad, I am good. How are you? Thank you for joining us. I can't be more excited for the break, but I will say I'm still trying to figure out how we can do Better Than Ever live shows during the holiday break. Now, those of you outside of the United States are like, who the heck cares? But we here in the United States care about our Thanksgiving holiday, and I am definitely taking Thursday off, but we'll see about Wednesday and Friday. As always, this is not meant to be medical advice. I'm not your doctor. I haven't seen you and examined you and looked at x-rays and MRIs. Nothing we talk about here is medical advice. It is meant for general information and educational purposes only. If you have specific medical concerns, talk to your doctor. If you want to come see me in either Charlotte, North Carolina or Charleston, South Carolina, I would love that. You can go to my website, drdavidgeier.com, and find the contact form and figure out how to do all of that. I'd love to hear if you're watching this live, whether you're on YouTube, whether you're on Facebook, whether you're on LinkedIn. Definitely feel free to comment on anything we talk about today. We're going to talk a lot about aging and your brain and cognitive decline, whether it's sleep, whether it's other types of treatments. There's a lot about that. We're going to talk a little bit about nutrition and diet stuff today. We're going to talk about how your personality might dictate how long you're going to live. And spoiler alert, there may be some bad news coming for me. We'll talk about that. All right, let's start out with something that is... This got a lot of attention, but it's misleading in how it's, at least in my mind, the attention that it got. I think the media sort of missed the take-home point of this study, but it is worth talking about. We talk a lot about what type of diets work. And a few weeks ago, I did a study, or talked about a study where maybe it's shifting from one diet to another over time, and being metabolically flexible may be at best for helping you lose weight. But generally, if you ask nutrition experts from around the world, what is the one best diet? The one that's going to get the most answers is the Mediterranean diet. Plant-based diet largely, whole grains, legumes, maybe fish, that kind of thing. Not so much the traditional Western diet, lots of red meats and processed foods and things like that. Now, the Mediterranean diet, the reason it gets all that is people say it helps prevent dementia. It lowers your risk of diabetes, heart disease. Some people even say that it lowers your risk of ED, erectile dysfunction. But researchers at the University of Oslo in Norway have some concerns with the Mediterranean diet based on a study they did very recently. They looked at 27 British students, how to meet the typical Western diet for a week, then a week of the Mediterranean diet. And all throughout, they got urine samples from these 27 students. And what they found is that when they were on the Mediterranean diet, their urine contained high levels of harmful chemicals. In fact, 3 times higher levels of insecticides and organophosphates with people that were on the Mediterranean diet. But here, and that's what got all the attention. The organophosphates, the insecticides, are linked to a number of bad problems. They're what's called EDCs, endocrine disrupting chemicals. They're the synthetic pesticides basically get in your body and they block the function of your normal hormones and instead have their own negative effects. And so they've been linked to issues with fertility. They've been linked with problems with your immune system and growth problems during puberty. Also been linked to things like cancer, diabetes, and obesity. Here's the thing, and so that got all the attention in the media, that the Mediterranean diet may make you infertile. Here's the sort of the big thing to take away from this that didn't get a lot of media exposure. The effects, the negative effects, or the pesticides, the organophosphates that appeared in the urine almost only seemed to be in the people that were on the Mediterranean diet that ate non-organic fruits and vegetables. The ones that ate organic fruits and vegetables, 90% lower levels of those pesticides and other contaminants. So is it the Mediterranean diet that's the problem, or is it eating traditional farm-grown fruits and vegetables and not the organic, sort of what we call clean? I am a huge fan of organic for a lot of reasons. I don't know that this study gives you enough indication, certainly not enough indication to give up the Mediterranean diet. I would argue that is very good for you. But it is something to think about if you're going to eat lots of fruits, lots of vegetables when you can. And I know cost is an issue, and we're going to talk about cost of plant-based diets here in a second. But when you can, maybe try to consider local fruits and vegetables, local produce, as opposed to ones that are shipped in, and when at all possible, go organic. But just understand that all that media attention about the Mediterranean diet, I think a lot of the people that reported on that study, a lot of the outlets, media outlets, sort of missed that key part, that it wasn't necessarily the Mediterranean diet, it was the people that did the Mediterranean diet, but non-organic foods. Speaking of cost, the trick with plant-based diets is that conventionally people say, all right, these are difficult from a financial standpoint. Basically, it's more expensive. You go to a Whole Foods or anywhere these places get lots of fruits and vegetables, in theory, it's going to be more expensive. But a new study out of Oxford University, published in the Lancet Planetary Health, found that vegetarian, vegan type diets may actually be cheaper. What they found is that if you did a vegan or vegetarian diet, fruits, vegetables, legumes, whole grains, that tended to cut the cost of food of your regular diet over the course of the week 21 to 34% compared to traditional Western diets with meats. Now, if you were what they called, and I've never heard this term, Flexitarianism, where you occasionally eat meat, poultry, fish, and dairy. One of my good friends, Roger Love, calls himself a dirty vegan, and I think this is what he is, a flexitarian. It just seems crazy to me, but you occasionally eat meats. Still drop it, but at only about 14%. The one food group that tended to be the most expensive was fish. It actually had the highest cost, was the most expensive per calorie. So if you're pescatarian, that may add on to your benefits. So it's hard. I do feel that cost is important. One of the concerns, you've heard me rant about ultra-processed foods and fast foods, but one of the challenges is a lot of times these boxed foods, these bagged foods, and certainly fast foods are cheaper than going to get all the ingredients and making a whole food type meal. And so finding ways to keep the cost of that down could certainly be beneficial to your health. All right, as I've said many, many, many times, I am fascinated by lifespan and longevity and ways to, health span, ways to not just live longer, but feel great doing it, being as active as you can be later in life. And two nutritional concepts have been proposed as being beneficial for longevity. One is calorie reduction, basically cutting your overall number of calories a certain percentage. That's been shown multiple times to be good for longevity. Another one that has been proposed is fasting, and especially what is now called intermittent fasting, time-restricted feeding, where you eat all your meals in a very narrow window of time and you're basically fasting the rest of the day. The trick is the studies that show a benefit in terms of longevity from daily fasting, typically that includes calorie restriction. The thought is if you eat all your meals within 3 hours, overall the amount of calories that you consume is going to be less. So what these researchers did, and this was published in the journal Nature Metabolism, I think this interests me more than probably it does you. They took mice. This is not a human study. It'd be interesting to know if this applies to humans. Took the male mice, put them in 4 groups. Two of the groups, no restriction on calories. 2 of them had 30% reduction in calorie. One group could eat as much as they want, no restriction on time. The other group could eat as much as they want, but had to do it within a 3-hour window. Then the calorie reduction group, same thing. 30% less calories, but could eat it throughout the day, or 30% less calories, all done within 3 hours. And what they found is that the mice that ate all their food in one morning meal, whether or not it restricted their calories, had lower blood sugar, better use of fat stores for energy, basically better metabolism, burning fat and everything else, just definitely good. They were less frail as they got older, and they lived longer. They had longer lifespans. So it looks like narrowing your eating window and having more of your day in a fasting state seems to be good for your health and good for your longevity, whether or not that involves some period of calorie reduction. So I'm a huge fan of fasting, the intermittent fasting or time restricted feeding. I'm a big fan of longer fasts, 24 hours, 3 days, even up to 5 or 7 days, assuming you do it, under proper sort of medical supervision and guidelines. But that can be very, very helpful, and that may be really good for you being healthy as you get older. All right, so you've heard my ordeals if you watch this show, especially the last 2 weeks, of me trying to find the perfect post-weightlifting shake. And I've talked about all the different stuff I put in it, that I put grass-fed protein powder in it. It's got chocolate powder. It's got apples. It's got this specific type of collagen powder called collagen, which contains Fortigel, which is a collagen peptide. All sorts of good stuff. But there are 2 other things that I have started to add to my protein shake over the last few weeks, and I'm going to tell you why I've added them. The first of those that I have added is, I'll tell you both. They are coffee. Yes, I've added coffee to my post-weightlifting shake, and I've added cinnamon. Here's why. First study published, I don't know what this was published in, but it was done, University of Michigan. I don't know what journal it was published in, but University of Michigan did it. They looked at coffee with sugar and, these frappuccinos, these mochachinos, these mocha chocolate chinos, whatever they are, what I like to call coffee flavored sugar bombs. They looked at that, which are more dessert than any kind of healthy beverage. Coffee is very helpful. I don't know that coffee in these basically dessert type drinks that people are drinking throughout the day, I don't know that that's terribly healthy. But they suggested and proved a very better alternative. Instead of sugar, add cinnamon to your coffee. What they did is they exposed human fat cells to a substance called cinnamaldehyde. That's what gives cinnamon its taste and smell. And what they found is those fat cells that were exposed to cinnamaldehyde express genes and enzymes that cause the burning of fat, not the storage of fat. So if you can't drink black coffee, and I get it, a ton of people I know cannot stand black coffee. Instead of adding sugar, instead of adding cream or milk, try cinnamon. It can be very good, boosting your metabolism, hopefully burning fat. So I've added a little bit of cinnamon to my coffee in my protein shake. But I drink black coffee in the morning, but for my protein shake, I add the cinnamon and the coffee. Here's why I added coffee to my protein shake in the first place. Literally, this study. There was a study in the journal Nutrients that just came out. So for a long time, people have been using caffeine, drinking coffee before a workout. Runners are the best example of this. They've been doing it for a long time. They say it improves performance. Maybe it does. I did it actually back when I ran in college. I did it because there were studies back then that showed that caffeine right before you ran started you burning fat much earlier and was just overall helpful for losing fat. In fact, I went to Wake Forest undergrad, and they have a huge exercise science program, so they're doing research all the time. And I had as part of some study, I had my body fat measured I don't know, my sophomore year, maybe junior year, I can't remember. And I was 3% body fat, and I attributed it to caffeine before I ran. But maybe caffeine after you work out has some benefits as well. So what these researchers did, they took 11 trained cyclists, these are high-level cyclists, and had them do a 4-hour ride, which is very exhausting. They had to go really fast for 4 hours in the afternoon. They did a low-carb meal so they couldn't carb load later that night, and then another 4-hour cycling ride the next morning. Then after that second ride the next day, or the second ride, the one on the second day, they were split into groups. Either one group got coffee, milk, and sugar, or the other group got milk and sugar with just a hint of coffee flavor so they couldn't tell the difference. And what they found is the cyclists that drank the coffee beverage after working out, their glycogen supplies increased 57% more than the cyclists who drank the beverage, the sugar, and the milk without the coffee. Basically, it allowed the storage of glycogen in their muscles, which is where your energy comes. It basically helps you refuel and perform better the next day. Doing it in that first 4 hours after the workout, that coffee was very, very beneficial. This may be a great alternative to what I think is sort of it's almost a joke, the carb loading that people do before a road race. Like here in Charleston, we have the Cooper River Bridge Run. It's one of the 10 biggest 10Ks here in the United States. It's huge. It's like 40,000 people. You run over a bridge. People come in from all over. A huge percentage of them not terribly in shape, not great runners. But I love hearing all these restaurants that are packed because all these people want to do this carb loading where they eat like 6 pounds of spaghetti the night before thinking it's going to make them perform better. Way more downside to that than upside. It probably doesn't help that much, especially if you're not metabolically trained to sort of load with carbs anyway. But refueling your muscles after a hard workout can be beneficial, and that's why a lot of post-workout drinks generally, that's where the chocolate milk after workout, that's where that came from, is that the little bit of protein, a little bit of carbs actually refuels your muscles. But add a little bit of coffee somehow after a workout, and the key is that it's within 0 to 4 hours after the workout. That's when your muscles basically make and store the most glycogen. All right, let's pivot a little bit and talk about diabetes and what foods increase your risk for diabetes. There's one, if you know anything about diabetes, everybody's going to say sugar. Sugar is the problem with diabetes, and that's true, but there may be another category of foods that are at fault. This may have a little bit of bad news for me. Study published in the journal Nutrition Journal looked at the role of dairy foods in the development of type 2 diabetes. That's the type of diabetes that develops because you just eat a horrible diet. They followed 639 people, males, females, evenly. These were adults. These were all people with type 2 or with pre-diabetes. And then over the next 9 years, they wanted to see who developed type 2 diabetes, going from pre-diabetes to type 2 diabetes. And then of the 25% that did develop diabetes, what were some common food or dietary risk factors? And what they found, this may surprise you, the less dairy, if you dropped your dairy consumption, your risk of developing diabetes actually went up. It might surprise you a little bit. But it seemed to be a little bit more specific about what types of dairy. So if you increased low-fat dairy consumption, even just by a half serving a day, it lowered your risk of type 2 diabetes. Low-fat milk and low-fat yogurt dropped your risk of developing type 2 diabetes 43%. But if you ate, this is terrible, this is just awful, regular full-fat cheese, it increased your risk of type 2 diabetes 66%. I love cheese. That is terrible news. I'm not pre-diabetic, so maybe I'm off the hook a little bit, but that's the thing. So low-fat dairy may lower your risk of type 2 diabetes. Here's the catch to this study. What you can't really figure out from this study is why. And is it that the people that basically gave up some of their dairy, in theory increasing their type 2 diabetes risk. In giving up that, did they eat, what did they substitute? What other foods? There's a chance that the foods they added were less healthy, unhealthy foods. So that it's a little tricky to definitely say, all right, I'm going to start drinking more low-fat milk and drinking or eating more low-fat yogurt because it's going to lower my diabetes risk. May not be quite that clear-cut, but maybe I need to rethink the cheese a little bit. Something I do need to eat more of is fish. All right, so a new study looked at the role of eating fish on a regular basis and developing cognitive issues, brain issues that lead to Alzheimer's and other dementias later in life. What they did, the researchers, this is a study published in the journal Neurology. They took people over 65 years old, 1,600 of them, did brain scans of all of them looking for vascular lesions, which were basically evidence of a potential stroke, or not stroke, but dementia or Alzheimer's later on, but they didn't have symptoms of it now. And then they also asked questions about their diet. And what they found is that people that had no symptoms at all, 2% of them had these small brain lesions, 8% had brain cavities and fluid buildup in 6%. So a small percentage, but again, these are people that don't even have symptoms of dementia, but are likely to develop it going forward. The people that didn't eat any fish at all on a regular basis, almost a third of them had those markers, the vascular markers for pending dementia. On the other hand, if you ate fish, that seemed to decrease your risk. In fact, if you ate fish 4 times a week, only 18% of them went on to have or proved to have those markers. So there's something about fish. Now, what this doesn't say, this is a link. This isn't saying if you eat more fish, you'll prevent dementia. We can't go that far, but there is something about it. So what is it about fish? Well, I'd tell you it's probably the omega-3s in fish, and we've talked about that before, but it doesn't have to be fish if you're just looking for a source of omega-3s. It could be walnuts, it could be flaxseed. Lots of things can get you omega-3s. It can be a supplement, but if it's not a big deal, you might consider adding fish to your diet. Again, we talked earlier about how fish is the most expensive of the healthy foods per calorie, but if you can prevent or at least lower your risk of Alzheimer's, might not be such a bad thing. But if we're talking about preventing cognitive decline and developing Alzheimer's and dementias, maybe there's ways to do that aren't what you eat, or ways to increase that risk. And one of the things that is known is that if you don't sleep enough, you're probably more likely to develop Alzheimer's disease. That's been shown in a number of studies. But a new study out of Washington University in St. Louis, which ironically is where I did my orthopedic sports medicine fellowship, they found that not just getting too little sleep is a risk for cognitive decline as you get older, but getting too much sleep is a problem. They took 100 older adults. These are people in their 70s, and none of them had, or very few of them had signs of dementia. A couple of them were starting to have cognitive impairment. And they put these EEG monitors on their brain. If you just ask people how long they sleep, that's highly inaccurate data. People always think that they sleep more than they do. Unless you've got like an Oura ring that tracks all of that, that data is not going to be terribly good. But the EEGs typically show you exactly how much you're sleeping. What they found is, in terms of developing cognitive decline over time, there was sort of a sweet spot. If you got less than 4.5 hours sleep a night, your risk went up. If you slept more than 6.5 hours of sleep per night, your risk went up. So there was that Goldilocks period, somewhere between 4.5 hours and 6.5 hours of sleep that tended to be best. Now, one thing you have to know about EEGs is, again, if you compare it to what people report, they think they sleep about an hour more. So that, just kind of keep that in mind. But there potentially is something about sleeping too much that could be the problem, according to this WashU study. Well, what I will tell you is I suspect what is going on isn't so much about the duration of sleep, but more about the quality of sleep. It's hard to prove. There's a lot of factors, but a lot of sleep experts believe that you may not need as much sleep as we say if that sleep is very good quality. You get lots of REM sleep, you get lots of the slow wave deep sleep. That may be enough. Whether that's true in terms of preventing cognitive decline, I don't know. But maybe as you get older, sleeping too much is a problem. And then last, in terms of cognitive decline, is there something you can do to prevent it? Well, it looks like you can actually play video games. Yes, that is right. I'm sure people everywhere would be happy about that. New study in the journal Behavioral Brain Research looked at using video games with a 3D environment and how that might affect your memory and your cognitive health. And so they put people into groups that played Super Mario World, which apparently is an immersive 3D environment. Some played Angry Birds, which was a dynamic flat play game, and then some played Solitaire, which is just basically a two-dimensional game. They did that for 30 to 45 minutes every day for 4 weeks, and then did memory tests throughout the experiment. What they found, just after 2 weeks of video games, Super Mario World and Angry Brothers, the participants had better cognitive skills. But only the group that did the Super Mario World saw that cognition and memory function improve going forward past the 4 weeks. And so they think there's something about these immersive 3D environments that help the brains of older adults, potentially slowing the progression of dementia and Alzheimer's and things like that. But they speculate that these immersive 3D environments may be beneficial no matter what your age is. So if you're going to let your kids play video games, maybe you do it in these three-dimensional systems. I don't know. I'm not super big on video games per se. That is a thought. I wonder how something like Super Mario World, some 3D immersive experience, would compare to some of the brain games or crossword puzzles or find the objects, that they're really small and hidden objects in these video games like that. I do kind of wonder the ones that are specifically made to be thinking games, I wonder how that compares. Really, really interesting. All right. What time do you go to bed every night? My bedtime has gradually been getting earlier and earlier over the last, 5-6 years or so. But it actually may affect your risk of developing heart disease. New study out of the University of Exeter in the UK tried to find out the best bedtime for your risk of cardiovascular disease. They studied over 88,000 adults, tracked them for almost 6 years, and they were all healthy at the beginning, tracked them for about 6 years to see who went on to develop cardiovascular disease, things like heart attacks and strokes and heart failure and TIAs, sort of precursors to strokes. 3% of those 88,000 went on to develop cardiovascular disease in that just about 6 years. And then they basically figured out, all right, where does bedtime correlate with that? So, if you went to bed after midnight, you had a 25% higher risk of developing cardiovascular disease. May or may not make sense. If you went to bed before 10 p.m., you had about the same increased risk, 24% increased risk. So after midnight was definitely worse, below 10 was definitely worse. The best time was if you went to sleep between 10 and 11 p.m. And the thought is that it's best for your circadian rhythm and exposure to daylight. I don't know. This surprised me. I wonder if the people that go to bed earlier than 10 then end up waking up earlier. I'm sure that's true. But then is it the being awake for several hours of darkness before the sun comes up that's potentially the problem? Because that's been thought to be a challenge that people have for the early risers. I don't know. So would that change your behavior? Are you more likely to go to bed between 10 and 11 because of this or not? If it's not a big deal, I think that's certainly a good thing. Certainly if you can help it, going to bed before midnight is a good thing. One of the things people do to keep themselves awake and stimulate themselves throughout the day is to drink coffee. But is there a potential concern with drinking lots of coffee? Well, researchers in Brazil and China say there potentially is. They use data from the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey. It looks at all kinds of dietary factors. Tons and tons of studies come from that database. It's over 13,000 adults in this database. And what they found is that the higher intake of caffeine you have tends to be linked to poor vitamin D absorption. Now, they're not saying that drinking lots of coffee causes you to have lower vitamin D levels, but that they're associated. Now, I'm all for it. There's a lot of benefits of coffee, black coffee, not the coffee flavored sugar bombs, within moderation. Now, and the problem is nobody really knows what's a healthy level. Most people say, 200 milligrams a day. I just did a study talking on one of my TV interviews about pregnant women and the recommendations. You want to stay 200 milligrams per day or lower than that. Some people say 400 milligrams a day, which is several cups of coffee. The key in my mind is maybe they're related, but just make sure you're getting enough vitamin D. Now, some people can go outside 30 minutes a day. They get anywhere from 10,000 to 20,000 IUs of vitamin D, which is terrific, especially if you're lighter skinned. If you're darker skinned, you don't tend to absorb that much sunlight, and so you might need supplementation. I'll tell you, almost everybody needs vitamin D supplementation. If you do lab work on people that don't supplement vitamin D, very, very frequently they're vitamin D deficient. There was a study maybe a decade ago looking at the New York Giants, the NFL team. 81% of the players were vitamin D deficient. So these are not just people unhealthy. These are very healthy people. So where else can you get vitamin D if it's not that Robert says coffee is good daily for liver health? That is very true. That study was just recently. I just read that. That is very true, that coffee, there's a study very recently shows that it's very good for your liver health, and a healthy liver is critically important to detoxifying and for fat metabolism and all sorts of other good things. So coffee may be good there. Where else could you get your vitamin D if you're going to drink a lot of coffee, but you're worried that it may lower your vitamin D absorption? Well, we talked about the sun. You can eat eggs, but specifically the egg yolks, 82 IUs. Somebody told me the other day that I should give up the egg yolks and just eat egg whites. And to them I say, how dare you? That's just terrible. You could eat sardines, I've done that before when I was on a keto diet. It's not the worst thing in the world. It's kind of weird. Milk, obviously. Raw mushrooms, another good source of vitamin D. And then again, supplements. At first when they were saying supplements, it was 500 or 1,000 IUs. Now I think the averages are around 2,000 IUs. I know doctors, and I'm not sure I necessarily disagree with this, again, for most people, but talk to your doctor, but anywhere from 5,000 to 10,000 IUs a day of supplementation may be beneficial. Again, you'd be surprised how many people are vitamin D deficient. And vitamin D plays so many roles in recovery from injuries and bone health and muscle health, immune system, athletic performance. There's just so many reasons vitamin D is important. All right, so I love talking about longevity, but one of the things that goes along with that is you want to look good as long as you can. And there is an interesting new food, drink, beverage that may play a role in your beauty, in your skin. And of course, there's a study out of Italy. When you're talking alcohol, you're talking Italy. I shouldn't say that. The Italians are great. But they looked at craft beer, these researchers, craft beer, and the antioxidants and the phenols in craft beer. This is a real legit study published in the journal Cosmetics. And the malts and the hops and the yeasts that are made to make craft beer create these phenols. If you take those phenols, the byproduct of making the craft beer, you can put it into skin care supplements, and apparently it is very good for your skin. Helps to mitigate aging. Why? Well, those phenols that the craft beer is creating, that the hops and the malts and the yeast are creating from craft beer, improve your mitochondria. We've talked about mitochondria a lot, the powerhouse of the cells, and they prevent oxidative stress, that inflammation that is killing your body. So craft beer in an indirect way may be good for skin aging. What this is not saying is you go out and drink a ton of craft beer every night. Maybe a little bit in moderation, that may be fine, but the phenols in craft beer potentially have some skin benefits. And last, let's talk about your personality. 5 personality characteristics that can help you live well later in life, certainly longer than the opposite of those personality traits. So just kind of when you're sitting there, think about your personality. Are you introverted or extroverted? Are you optimist or pessimist? Are you cheerful, helpful, whatever it is, and try to predict what these good ones are. All right, first one that helps you live longer is people that are conscientious, organized, responsible, tend to live longer. But why is that? Apparently they tend to exercise more, better nutrition. They also can deal with stressful situations more. You can deal with all that. You get your exercise, good food, you don't deal with the stress, less inflammation, healthier aging, slower aging, live longer. All right, another personality, I don't know that this is a characteristic, but people that have a purpose in their lives tend to live longer. And that was in that Blue Zones book that I talk about a lot. But having a direction in life with clear goals that energize you. Why? People with purposeful goals in life tend to have more volume in their brains. Always a good thing. They tend to live longer. So find a purpose in life. All right. The third one, optimism. I think if you talk to the people that are close to me, they'll tell you I'm the most optimistic person you will ever meet. That may or may not be true. All right, so people that are optimists tend to see aging as a positive. They look forward to being wiser, being more mature. Optimists live over 7.5 years longer than pessimists. They tend to exercise more. They tend to eat healthier. They tend to have less stress-related inflammation, just like the conscientious people. Optimists, all sorts of reasons to be an optimist. All right, extroverts versus introverts. Which ones do you think live longer? Well, it turns out being extroverted or outgoing is good for your lifespan. And this one's interesting because this one seems to be just about as important as cholesterol and smoking and things like that. And the thought is that the more extroverted you are, the more social relationships you have, and those social relationships help you live longer. So whether or not you're naturally extroverted, try to have a lot of friends and colleagues and people you can network with, especially as you get older. And then the last one you probably won't think of, but I think this is probably the funniest of all of them. The fifth thing that will help you live the longest, the fifth personality trait, a lack of neuroticism. Basically being able to keep an even keel no matter what. It's good for your heart, helps you sleep better, both of which help you live longer. But what they're getting at is particularly type A people really struggle with this. They're ambitious, yes, they've got purpose, but they tend to lash out when things aren't going their way, leading to cardiac problems. Anxiety and depression can come about, develop. That helps you age faster. That's been shown multiple times. So finding ways to not be neurotic, calming your type A tendencies may potentially be good. I'm in real big trouble with this. I am not naturally an optimist, as my friends will tell you. I deal well with it. I can be extroverted. I'm naturally sort of introverted, but you put me at a party, I can talk to people. It's just not what I would naturally want to do, but not naturally extroverted. Tend to have a smaller group of people rather than tons of friends and people to network with. But in my mind, that works for me. Definitely type A. I'm going to die really soon, apparently. All right, what do you think? What kinds of comments on any of this do you have? What personality are you? And is it good or bad? I could have predicted the type A thing might be bad with stress and the way you react to things. Optimism, that absolutely makes sense. The purpose thing I've read multiple times, so I believe that. But I don't know. Very interesting to me. All right. Joy was talking about the time the person got up. Yeah, I would love to know that as well, in terms of when you go to bed, when you get up. Because if you're going to bed from 10 to 11, but then you're waking up at 3, or you're not sleeping well, is that really beneficial for your heart? I think there's a lot of variables there. What I would tell you is find ways to go to bed same time every night, wake up the same time every morning. One, it's just good to help you fall asleep and get your body ready to fall asleep, and then help it wake up the next day in the morning, including weekends. A lot of times the mistake people make is they get up early because they have to go to work, so they get up at 5 in the morning during the week and then sleep till 9 on weekends and wonder why they struggle with their sleep. So if you talk to most sleep experts, they'll tell you 7 days a week, try to get up at the same time. But yeah, that would be interesting. If you go to bed at 10 or 11, and get up at 6, well, maybe that is good, but if you're getting up at 4, maybe not so much. And Joy, I saw your comment after the last show, and I really appreciate what you said. I only saw it after I got off the air. I would have shared it. But very much appreciate you being here. Muhammad, you've got some questions about a knee issue. I am doing Ask Dr. Geier live tomorrow. So same time tomorrow. A special bonus Friday edition of Better Than Ever Live. I'm going to just answer your questions. So if you have a weight loss question, if you have a health question, wellness question, and as Robert here will tell you, if I don't know the answer, I go find it and then share it with you next time. Or if it's a sports or exercise injury, bone, joint, back in my beautiful world of orthopedic surgery and sports medicine, I am happy to answer those. So join us tomorrow at noon Eastern. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm going to head to the gym. I get the opportunity to go work out early afternoon, which is sort of rare for me. I usually work out in the mornings. And yes, I've got my protein shake with the coffee and the cinnamon and the collagen and the protein powder and all that ready to go. You are so welcome, Joy. I am very excited to be here. Next week, I'm still working on what days we're going to do it. Definitely going to be here Tuesday at noon. May or may not be here Wednesday and Friday next week. Probably more likely Wednesday than Friday. There will be no show next Thursday. And for those of you joining us for Ask Dr. Geier Live tomorrow, or that don't and want to get the podcast, I don't put those in the podcast form of this show. So you got to attend LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, Live. There are the links to do that. I'm Dr. David Geier on every platform, DrDavidGeier, including TikTok, which I've never actually used. But that you can always find me there. Subscribe, click the notifications, and you'll know when we're on live. I look forward to seeing you very much. And Hannah, I couldn't agree more. Sleeping and waking up the same time for me is super important. It's one of the best things I ever did to try to get my sleep on track, was trying to go to bed at roughly the same time within about a 30-minute window. But the kicker for me, waking up at the same time every morning. Very, very helpful. Thank you so much. I look forward to seeing some of you tomorrow for Ask Dr. Geier Live. The rest of you, if you don't have any medical questions, join us Tuesday. And have a fantastic